Okay, well, thank you everyone for tuning in and welcome to CTO Talk. I'm your host, Matt Ferrari. On this 30-minute program, we get to discuss the issues, the challenges, the opportunities that are impacting healthcare technology. You can always follow the show on Twitter at #CTO Talk or follow me at MP Ferrari. Really excited today. With me, I have Josh Siegel, the CTO of CareCloud. I've been fortunate enough to know Josh for quite a few years now and follow all the happenings that go on inside of CareCloud, at least from afar, over the last couple of years. And today I really wanted to talk about some of the advancements that CareCloud has been going through and the transformations around machine intelligence and interoperability. And they've had some exciting news with Google, so really wanted to dive into that. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, no, this forum is great. It'll be kind of like any of the other conversations that we've had over the last few years, so looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about CareCloud?
Yes, well, CareCloud is a electronic medical record and practice management system, as well as a patient engagement platform, patient experience management, that's entirely cloud-based, really born in the cloud, built out of native microservices, right? Trying to take those concepts and those architectures from the ground up to offer, the next generation of what people have already been using in the industry now for 20 or 30 years, but trying to really bring that into the modern cloud age.
Yeah, that's helpful. The first time I interacted with CareCloud, it was probably 5 years ago or so now. And one of the things that I loved about CareCloud and a focus was how to kind of make that space easier. A lot of times I speak with physicians and hear, how difficult their EHR is or their practice management system or their revenue cycle system. And, they of course have regrets from, making choices of, enormous EHRs or practice management systems out there. And so as you think about cloud adoption and building on microservices, Josh, how do you think about kind of the user experience, or what does your process there look like?
Yeah, it goes back to some fundamental principles of computer science and software design, right? There's no limit to how complicated a piece of code you can use to solve a problem, right? I could validate a user's first name with 1,000 lines of code, or I could do it with one. And if you think about how a lot of these legacy systems have grown over decades, it's inevitable without a lot of energy that they just become kind of a collection of all of the requirements or all of the fields or all of the data that they've ever been responsible for, right? And if you think about that from an end user perspective, during any given patient visit or any given clinical encounter, a relatively small portion of that is relevant to what you're trying to do at any given time, right? And what makes really good software, which people are used to experiencing now with more, let's say, consumer-facing applications that are maybe designed to be native mobile, they're trying to only present the information that is most useful and usable. That's what makes really great UX. And so the aim here with that microservices architecture is to provide the front end with just the right context. So you're seeing all the information that you need without seeing most of the information that you don't. And if you do need to go get more, it's just a quick access to go pull the rest of it. And like I was saying, that has to be done very intentionally, and you have to begin from the beginning, right? You have to start from those base microservices. They do one thing, they do it well. You combine them together, and they can offer really powerful dynamic workflows that can use the same code, process, logic, authentication, data access restrictions, regardless of what the end user is actually trying to accomplish in the software.
Yeah, that is extremely helpful. And, as you think about the history of CareCloud, I know that you guys didn't start, born in the cloud, and microservices was a journey for you guys. And I've been honored enough to see you guys grow and really focus on how to be really innovative as an organization. Would you mind walking our listeners through, part of or some of your cloud journey at CareCloud. And the reason why is, as you would guess, lots of healthcare organizations are trying to get to where you are.
Yeah. No, it is definitely a journey, right? And it's not something that can be done overnight. These projects takes, sometimes definitely months to years to plan, and then, on the good side, sometimes months to years to execute. But, I would say if you're starting from a relatively strong place, which we were even when we were managing some of our own co-location facilities, we found good people to work with, like your team at Clear Data, that helped us really architect what that middle step looks like, right? Where you're moving your services up, you're figuring out how to decompose them, you're figuring out the new security and access models, the new way you're going to deploy your API gateways, and really taking this thing, one step at a time. It doesn't have to be everything, but if you're going to be, let's say hybrid, you're partially on-prem, partially in the cloud, depending on the type of service that you're offering. There's also ways of doing that with redundancy and really great security through direct connects, and there's things that you can do on your physical network to help build that bridge. And then it's going to be a lot of work for your software developers to figure out the new patterns, right? Because running software in a distributed system that is, I'll say, more redundant than resilient, right? Because that's kind of the thing that you're trading. When you're running your own colos, I can buy 7 power supplies and make sure that everything's been cabled and tested, and if anything breaks, no problem. And when you're in the cloud, it's more that you have nearly unlimited capacity to scale, and if something dies, if your software is coded well, you just automatically route around those types of failures. So it's a lot of intention has to go into the way the software is going to handle those edge cases.
And kind of the last question on this topic, if I can, Josh, what, as you went through this journey from co-location to cloud native, there's been tons of articles written on some of the unknown unknowns or challenges. Would you mind sharing with the audience, what were you surprised about? What was a hurdle that you had to overcome there?
Oh, I guess it's interesting to try to pick just one. I think when you are building software where you're really in control of, you're out buying the CPU and a particular motherboard, and you're really thinking about, okay, this Rails application might need this much RAM to run this worker, right? You tend to think kind of very linearly. As scale is ramping up, you're always kind of thinking in this linear mode. And when you get into a pure cloud infrastructure, the game changes a bit, right? Where maybe you're not looking for the top class of hardware, right? Sometimes it's more beneficial to have a larger fleet of lower class hardware, so that like I was saying, in terms of being able to be distributed across a wider area for the same unit economics, right? So for the same amount of total CPU, I can put it in twice as many places, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you think about, I want my service to run as fast and as reliably as it can, that maybe it's worth putting everything in the best hardware, when it turns out maybe there's a middle ground there, right? Where what's that break-even point where you're getting the most effective execution in each of the machines, and then spreading it out in as many places physically as you can.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very similar to the models that we've seen from a lot of our other customers as well. Switching gears, recently there was a press release and an announcement regarding your partnership with Google. Would you mind letting us know what's going on with that?
Well, it's obviously super exciting. We've been cloud native for a while. Google has made, I think, quite a splash in the last couple of years But one of the things that we've noticed in working closely with them is they're really putting an emphasis on the talent and the energy in the healthcare vertical. A little different than what some of the other public cloud folks are kind of how they're approaching the healthcare ecosystem, right? So they're also doing some other stuff that I just find kind of personally aligned with, right? They're working on projects related to open standards, specifically the healthcare data API, and trying to put out the best reference implementation they can for the FHIR standard, right? And this is something that we all need to, every healthcare organization is going to need to work on it. But it is an open standard, and we've all, participated in the standards drafting and adoption. But, frankly speaking, for me, just as a kind of a personal ethic again, I don't like writing redundant code, especially in something as, cost sensitive, and I'm always mindful of wasting anybody's time or energy and money, especially in healthcare, right, where we need to really get as much value as we can out of our systems, and then figure out how we can overall just reduce the administrative cost and burden to run healthcare in the U.S. I think it's just a great idea on their part to take some of their brightest software engineers and put them on this problem we all share, and then essentially everybody benefits if we can get together and use this technology across multiple organizations. That's when it really starts to pay back the investment that all of us have done in participating in the HL7 and FHIR exercises to this point.
Yeah, I was actually meaning to ask you about that. From the very start of me going to HIMSS events, interoperability has been such a hot topic. And as I think about Google Cloud, I'm thinking about data processing with Dataproc, or machine learning with ML Engine, or scalable analytics with BigQuery, these kind of things. And clearly, every year at HIMSS, people are talking about let's get to the panacea of interoperability. I'd love to hear from you. How do you see organizations getting on board with the Google Cloud or the Google Healthcare API, and how can we kind of evangelize other organizations to become part of it?
Well, I think it's twofold, right? Actually, the first point there is also excellent. If you think about the tools and the ecosystem around in GCP, right, the ability to stream data in and out of your FHIR server using nice utilities like Dataproc, or taking advantage of obviously Google is quite well known for being able to index large amounts of data, right, which is a classic problem. But that is essential for FHIR to be actually useful. It's all about how that data can be indexed, how it can be both aggregated and identified, right, to be able to run really useful searches against it. That's the point of putting it all into this common interoperable format. Now, I would say we talked about it as a panacea. It's definitely not a cure-all, right? Because FHIR fundamentally is a format for interoperability. So it's overly generic at times, so that it can work in any system, which does make it, maybe semantically less useful. If you're looking for something maybe of more direct business value. I'm not sure if I'll bore everybody that's listening, but if you're actually trying to find the first name of a patient in FHIR, there's no field called first name, right? You have to know that there's a name collection, and the name has a type, and the type is in an array element, and you got to go find the one in the right position, on and on, that kind of goes, right? But, as the data format gets more broadly used, I think we'll start to see common semantic models emerge on these centralized FHIR servers, right? So run this out a year or two. But if lots of people are using the healthcare API on Google, we'll start to see kind of usage patterns emerge on top of the standard, and that helps everybody again, right? You're looking for a first name the same place that I'm looking for a first name. And these patterns emerge when more and more companies and partners are sharing the data through this interoperable Switzerland.
Absolutely. How do how do you guide healthcare organizations to to become part of this almost consortium or movement to kind of unify the the approach with Google?
Well, I'll say the philosophy at CareCloud, right, is always, we've always tried to be open with our APIs, right? And if our providers are either building something or they have a partner that is developing software for them or a tool that they're using, we try to find ways to get those developers access, obviously by validating and testing their code and giving them the right level of restricted permissions. But when you have a format that's already kind of designed for that native interoperability, I think the driver is still going to really be a business reason, right? Ultimately, interoperability for interoperability's sake doesn't really deliver anything to the market. There's going to have to be either a clinical or financial need to exchange these data. But let's say it's something, maybe less obvious, like new types of research or new ways of analyzing large data sets to provide care plan recommendations or clinical decision support. These new tools, like the next generation of tools that provide these capabilities, are all built on Fire, right? So I think that's going to be the driver of the next wave. It's like if you're a new company, like somebody else that we partner with, Stanson, they helped work on the CDS hooks specification, right? And at least the way that it runs now, that software was basically born out of Fire models, right? So it runs best when connecting to multiple Fire servers, and it even gives its recommendations back in the Fire format, right? So as the next wave of these types of technologies emerge, they'll just start with Fire and they'll never send you data in any other format, and that'll bring everybody else along.
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing more and more as well. I'm seeing almost every conversation now, at least with kind of the startup to mid-size organizations, is all Fire related, which is just amazing progress. Yeah, and speaking of kind of the next wave, Josh, what are your thoughts on where you see this space at? Whether it's the interoperability or almost kind of the machine intelligence space. Where do you see it going in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean it's obviously a exciting topic. It seems these two things seem to be really buzzing, I would say, at every conference and in almost every meeting where guys like you and I are getting together to compare notes. I think from my perspective, they're hand in glove right now. I think the challenge with any type of machine learning and machine intelligence is the dirty data munging, right? To get everything prepped, to have everything in a common format where you can actually end up with a machine intelligence that learns something useful. So I think Fire and data standardization actually leads logically into this, right? Where if more people are able to produce data in a common format, then you're going to keep producing smarter and smarter intelligences that are able to do more things. Again, I think it's something that maybe the hype train gets going a little faster than the practical application. We're always looking for ways on bringing it in, right? And I think, you see these stuff on, like a LinkedIn or a Hacker News or something, but like where AI will replace, this profession within 10 years or 20 years, right? Like, I think we get way ahead of ourselves with some of this dialogue, right? But if you think about where it has practical use in the next 12 to 24 months, there's a lot of boring and repetitive tasks that are big drivers of dissatisfaction in both EHR and electronic billing systems, right? And these are things that machine intelligence is actually great at, right? You observe lots of human behavior. You make prediction based on the way this person did this particular task, maybe hundreds of times. And the machine intelligence can think about the ways of, offering the best solution. You think about something maybe as simple as routing clinical documents. This is something that we were working with Google as well on, because they've released their Vision API, and which is HIPAA compliant. So you can start to see how these multiple cloud native tools start to be woven together to be able to produce something totally new and very valuable in a relatively short amount of time. If you roll that out, a year or two from now, that prediction can be offering, maybe help with lab interpretation or prioritization. It's all very practical, I would say, is what we're going to see over the next year or two, is like very practical things to help with boring tasks that really, I think the people, especially in our line of work, don't want to be doing the same thing in their EHR over and over again. It gets in the way of patient care. It makes it, it takes longer to get home at the end of the day. If you can save, let's say 10% of what somebody used to do in a repetitive way, and that turns out to be, 30 minutes of their day, and they get to be not 30 minutes behind in their rounds seeing patients, I think that's a good trade, right? I think people would get on board to have a kind of a robotic assistant that offered that kind of help and value.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, you and I haven't spoken about this, but I was in a conversation, this was last week, or maybe the week before. No, it was last week at Gartner Symposium. And the conversation was around using similar technologies, so more on the machine learning side, actually also with Google, to try to drive better outcome, but not better outcome just from, give me the right prescription or let me know, the trends with my phenotype of, what kind of reactions I could have, but instead trying to drive down costs. So they were, in their example, they're an oncology software, and the oncology software is, every single time someone goes in for a treatment, they have to get 8 different doctors together to discuss what the potential outcome would be and what should the oncology treatment be. And they're thinking about now using these machine learning and machine intelligence services to try to drive out costs from, both all the way down to the patient, because no longer should you have to, get 8 doctors in a room. You should try to drive some kind of intelligent knowledge, by being able to leverage all this data together. So, a little different, but actually also using the healthcare APIs. At least that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. I think we'll see this kind of hybrid model where the physician is obviously still front and center making all of the decisions, but yeah, I mean, if you can bring in, and that's what I try to use the term machine intelligence over like an artificial intelligence, right? Because it's really just learning how to do one useful thing in a very narrow domain right now. So in these clinical models, right, you're like looking for something that can help facilitate the provider's actual process, right? It's like we always have to analyze these data this way. We're trying to optimize for these cost models, and the model is too complicated to do with a rules-based system, right? So your only option really is to go to some kind of machine intelligence or do it with humans. So yeah, it's a good time to be working on these kind of projects because we have the data, and right now we have great computing tools that can start to scratch the surface.
Absolutely, that's extremely helpful. I know we're running out of time. Just one more question, if I can, Josh. If you were If you were joining a new kind of SaaS organization and you wanted to get involved, in either public cloud adoption or contributing to, a similar model, around FHIR and interoperability, do you have any advice for anyone? What kind of counsel would you give them?
I would say start small, right? I mean, especially with introducing some kind of interoperability into an existing platform, right? Or if you're thinking about building a new app, there's an urge to want to re-platform everything all at once. Like, we're going to throw away our database model and we're going to replace everything with FHIR tomorrow, right? The net of I'll say just of agile software development in general, right? And these microservices patterns that are, the way that you can leverage the technical capability of the cloud, almost lends itself to being able to start small, right? Let's say we're going to be able to share our patient demographics or our claim requests. You can just start with those, figure out, where that fits into your overall data flow, and you can deliver great value with relatively, I'll say relatively in quotes, but relatively little effort, right, compared to the value that you're going to get back.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Josh, thank you for taking the time. I'm always, humbled to speak with CareCloud and speak with yourself around what's going on. You're easily one of the more innovative healthcare organizations out there, and I appreciate the time. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have a comment about today's episode, you can always check out or follow #CTO Talk on Twitter, or follow me at MP Ferrari. You can, of course, learn more about today's episode or CTO Talk in general by going to healthcarenowradio.com or at cleardata.com. Until next time, I'm Matt Ferrari. Have a good week.